surroundings of Anglesey Circuit in North Wales play host of a third meeting of the season for the 2019 Avon Tyres National Formula 4 Championship. So far this season, 2 weekends in, we've had 5 different race winners in what's been a fantastic start to the season, showing just how competitive Formula Ford racing still is for young drivers making a career in the sport. Just how competitive? Well, let's show you a recap of the first couple of rounds to give you an idea of who the main contenders really are. The opening weekend saw sunny skies and blazing hot sunshine as the Snetterton Circuit in Norfolk saw the early suitors battle it out for early supremacy. James Clark was involved in an early scrap with Team Dolan's Ross Martin, with the former Scottish champion getting the best of the Cliff Dempsey racing driver in the early stages. Clark's teammate Spike Colbecker edged him wide at turn 1 before he went on to take second place, as Rory Smith was the one that took the first victory and first blood in 2019 on his BM Racing Medina chassis. Race 2 was more attrition filled as drivers such as Nicole Woods found the limits and caused a red flag, seeing the first stoppage of the season. When racing did get back underway, the likes of Neil McLennan, Ross Martin and eventual race winner Spike Colbecker from America battling it out for the victory. Spike's been a sensation in his first year at racing in the UK after racing in New Zealand and Canada, and Lyndsay caught up with him just before race 1 to see how he prepares.
Spike, we're just going quickly through, and you are one of our 5 winners that we've had so far this season. Obviously, you're in a good starting position today, and we've just quickly seen you mentally go through the track in your head there. Can you quickly talk about your plans ahead?
Yeah, well, it's definitely going to be a difficult task. No task is really easy in sports racing, especially at this level. Cars are all even, but you really just got to hit your marks, make no mistakes, no lockups or anything like that, and it's really about who gets to drive off the corners better and just be smart and find the rubber around the outside of the track.
So you're feeling confident going in today now that the track's drying up slightly?
Yeah, I mean, I felt pretty confident going in the qualifying and put it on pole just barely. But coming in, it's still going to be a wet track. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's not enough time to dry up the whole track, so it's still going to be a wet race.
Brilliant. Well, we wish you the best of luck, Spike.
Thank you.
Race 3 saw a reverse grid with Max Maserati leading in the early stages, but Neil McLennan was quick to overhaul him at the complex to take the lead. And despite coming under immense pressure from fellow Scotsman Ross Martin all throughout the race, McLennan was able to keep his cool and show his experience in Formula Ford to take the victory. McLennan's been a front-running contender in the last couple of seasons and will hope that this year is the year he can finally capture the title. So Lyndsay also caught up with him in the assembly area to find out how he's approaching the Anglesey weekend.
Thanks indeed, Scott. Yes, I'm down here in assembly area right before race 1 is about to get underway, and in fact I'm going to have a quick catch up with Neil McLennan, which is one of the 5 winners that we've had so far. So Neil, how are you expecting this weekend to go?
Hopefully it'll go okay. We were quick yesterday and the day before. We've been testing for 2 days, so it's gone alright so far. Qualifying was a bit of a pain. We were in the lead up and towards the end, I think, and then dropped the front left wheel in the grass, so lost a bit of time. So starting third, see how that goes, but hopefully it'll be fine. The rain's going to suit us better than the dry release, so it should be fine.
The opening race at Alton Park saw pole sitter James Clark barely head to turn 1 as he understeered wide at the start and straight into the tyre barriers. James thankfully was physically okay, although with a little bit of dented pride in the process. As he headed back to the paddock, his Cliff Dempsey Racing teammate Jonathan Brown went on to take his first National Formula 4 victory and make it 4 winners from 4 races. And then it became 5 out of 5 when Ross Martin was able to escape an early incident between Spike Colbecker and Neil McLennan to cross the line and take the checkered flag. Lyndsay also caught up with him in the holding area before race 1.
Ross, so you're one of our 5 winners we've currently had this season. Have you got any plans for hopefully making it back on the top step today?
Yeah, I'd like to get a good start off the line. It's always tricky in these conditions, but a good clean race would be good. Hopefully on our podium now. You know, I'd be like to get a win here, but it's not the be all and end all. It's all about keeping the car on the track and getting those points home for the championship.
So how are you feeling? Obviously with the track, it was really wet this morning. It's now starting to dry up. What kind of setup have you got planned?
Yeah, you can see here it's slightly drying, so hopefully a kind of mid to dry setup almost. You know, the track could be potentially dry by the end of the race, so we don't want to compensate too much at the start of the race because it's going to be a long old finish. But yeah, 15 minutes, it's going to be hard, but I'll try to keep my nose clean and get the car home safe.
Well, we will see you at the other end, my friend. Best of luck.
Thank you, cheers.
So the contenders are ready, and hopefully you're ready for 3 exciting races of the weekend, here at Anglesey in North Wales. Here's the grid for race 1 with Spike Colbecker taking pole position, Ross Martin lining up alongside him on the front row. The Neil McLennan and Rory Smith. A cracking qualifying from Brendan Lee puts him 5th ahead of the MacArthur brothers David and Tom, and Jamie Sharp lining up in 8th. Jamie Thorburn makes a welcome return in 9th. He starts on row 5 alongside James Clark, then Morgan Quinn and Michael McPherson, Adam Quartermain and Aaron Jeanson, Scott Huntley and John Svensson, with Pascal Monbowen and Nicole Woods rounding out the 18-car grid for this first encounter of the weekend at Anglesey. So the weather conditions are slightly adverse, very overcast and grey skies, and there's been some rain this morning in qualifying, which means that car settability has been an absolute nightmare. So could be a bit of a venture into the unknown. Let's see how the guys handle it here. As the red lights come on, they go out, and racing gets underway for race 1 here at Anglesey, and it's a lightning start for this man, Neil McLennan, shooting the gap through the middle of Spike Colbecker and Ross Martin, and he gets the whole shot into turn 1. We're on board with Colbecker as Ross Martin goes down the outside for second place, getting very sideways on the exit. You can tell that even in these slightly intermediate conditions, just how tricky it is for these Formula Fords, as Colbecker on the inside of the banking loses another place in the process. That's Rory Smith squirming up the inside for 3rd place. However, Colbecker is fighting back on the inside line on the sprint towards the right-hander at Church. There's another move just behind. That's Tom MacArthur in the white and orange machine, just ahead of Brendan Lee now in the Kevin Mills Spectrum. Onto the back straight now, up towards the complex at Rocket at the top of the hill. McLennan leads with fellow Scotsman Ross Martin in close pursuit. Now with Spike Colbecker looking to the outside line on the braking zone towards Rocket. They head to the top of the crest, little sideways for Colbecker and also for Tom MacArthur as everyone tries to find grip around the outside line. There is Aaron Jeanson, number 24, and he's watching ahead of these men. This is one of them, James Clark, and he's now battling just behind Morgan Quinn and Jamie Thorburn. Jamie there in the dark blue and white car. He's not with Cliff Dempsey like he has been the last couple of seasons. He's with his own team, Border Reavers Racing, and he's a very welcome return to the championship after taking some time off to focus on his exams. Now the car's heading out through the end of the hairpin at the corkscrew. Instead of turning right onto the coastal circuit back to the pits, they then go left through the hairpin, up down the Tom Price straight and into the hairpin for the first time. And this is going to be very tricky with slightly patchy conditions here as they head under brakes. See there Brendan Lee heading up the inside of David MacArthur, now back into a MacArthur sandwich, as David's brother Tom is now just ahead of him after making that move at Church Corner just a few minutes ago. You can see little trails of spray there in the background, so it's not quite dry. There's still some wet patches around, and Ross Martin trying to find the grip on the outside line, or the karting line as it's known, to make a move here for McLennan, but the top two have broken away initially. We're back on board with James Clark here. He's now going to be the next person to have a crack at David MacArthur. Looking up the inside into turn 1. He shouldn't really be on the inside line because that's where the rubber is, where you get less grip in wet conditions, but he has squeezed his way through. Meanwhile, at the front, Ross Martin tries to put himself alongside with a better exit from the banking to tuck underneath the gearbox and looks to the inside line. But McLennan shuts the door, and I think he realises that he'll have better grip around the outside, which he does. And also watch for Rory Smith in the red Medina chassis for BM Racing in 3rd place. He's broken away from Spike Colbecker and now is quickly onto the tail of the top two as they head through the school curve and up towards the Rocket Complex. Here's the view from Spike Colbecker. In the distance is the top three scrapping amongst themselves as McLennan holds the lead. And now as they gather themselves back up again into the second part of the Rocket Complex. Again, McLennan taking a slightly wider line, which is preferred in wet conditions. You stay off the racing line where all the rubber is. Rory Smith, meanwhile, is looking pretty racy in second place, trying to steal that position away from Ross Martin. In fact, Martin runs wide, and as a result of that, Smith takes full advantage and steals up the inside line. There's Brendan Lee on board with him. First chance we've got for his onboard exploits. Double F1 Esports champion. The Anglesey for the first time this weekend as he heads into the corkscrew hairpin for the first time, and he gets very sideways, and there's contact! And it's been with Tom MacArthur. Tom moves the cones out of the way as he exits stage right and joins the circuit once again. Brendan Lee, whether he's got it going again or not, we'll have to wait and see as the leaders come out of the hairpin for the second time. Change confirmed for second as we saw. Rory Smith is up into second place. Spike Colbecker watches on, now trying to keep pace with the cars battling just in front of him as Martin goes back up the inside now for second, but he has to stop back into place. Up through the bus stop for the second time. Let's see what Martin's got, but there are hands out of the cockpit, and that can only mean one thing. The safety car's been deployed and the field has been neutralised, possibly for Brendan Lee's incident there. Line of board with Neil McLennan as he heads to the field, and look at that, very sideways action. Whoa, look at that. I've never seen aggressive tyre warming like that before from Neil McLennan, but in these slightly damp conditions where temperatures are cooler, it's that more difficult. Now there's the reason Brendan Lee has actually been collected by Jamie Sharp in the black and red car. Both are fine, they're just getting out of the cars, and I'm sure we'll go to the medical centre for a pure checkup and nothing else. But it does appear as though after the contact with Tom MacArthur, Brendan Lee's Kevin Mills Spectrum was stranded in the middle of the road, and as a result of that, it left a rather hapless Jamie Sharp, I'm sure, with nowhere to go, and collecting Brendan Lee. That puts both out on the spot. There's Tom MacArthur with his new aero appendage. I'm sure he's back to the pits to get the BM Racing Squad to remove the 2 cones he's collected. That won't be doing him too much. He won't make him go any faster, that's for sure. As the field bunch up behind the Mini Cooper safety car. Everyone, of course, again, weaving from side to side, just for anyone who's unsure. That means that they're doing so to keep up the heat and pressures in the tyres and the brakes to make sure they're at optimum performance, so that when racing gets back underway, they're not going to get the surprise of hitting the brake pedal and the tyres locking up, or turning the wheel and finding the car either understeering or oversteering wide, which in these damp conditions can be much more tricky than when you find it in dry and wet conditions instead. So it gives us a chance now to take a bit of a breather after what's been a rather frantic opening couple of laps. There's Morgan Quinn. He's one of the Team Dolan drivers this season, making his debut in Formula Fords in the National Championship. He's been a former Ginetta Junior racer, has done quite a bit of racing in Ireland, but good to see him taking the step into National Formula Fords. And just behind him there is the first of the 2 MacArthurs. Of course, Tom has gone into the pit lane after being collected by Brendan Lee, but David MacArthur, he and Tom are also competing in the Northern Formula Ford Championship, which is contesting its next rounds here this weekend, and he and Tom have been the dominant forces so far, and they've been looking to take a victory each at this point today. And Tom will feel it should have been 2, but he just made a bit of a mistake on the final corner on the last lap of race 1, put him wide, and that allowed David to go through. Tom was able to put that one right later on and go ahead and make it a MacArthur victory each for both of the brothers. Now thankfully both cars have been cleared away pretty quickly, and you can see also the sun starting to come out here, which you see a rather nice picturesque view in the background of the Irish Sea sparkling away in the sunshine. It's a rather unique picturesque location, of course, in Anglesey Circuit. Of course, it's on its own Isle of Anglesey, and it's right located on the coast, right at the tip of the North Wales Island. It's one of the best places to come for a race, and I know recently that Anglesey have also had the planning approved for some amendments to the circuit, which could bring an extra a couple of £1 million boosting tourism per year, which is fantastic. So hopefully we get some bigger calibre championships, such as maybe possibly the British Touring Car Championship or British GT, British Formula 3 or anything else like that, that may want to come here if they make some modifications. They're going to try and modify areas like the pit buildings, make some possible slight modifications to the circuit, maybe some changes to the paddock area, whatever are exactly the plans to improve Anglesey to get it up to standard of the likes of possibly Brands Hatch and Alton Park and Donington Park and Silverstone remains to be seen, but hopefully that they can get this job done and make sure that Anglesey can see some more top-class motorsport than it already does. So now on board with James Clark. He is now currently sat in 6th position, just behind number 50 of Jamie Thorburn, and then in 4th place, just ahead of Jamie, is the other Cliff Dempsey car here this weekend of Spike Colbecker. No Jonathan Brown, who was the race winner as you saw earlier on in race 1. He's otherwise occupied with exams, and of course to many people exams are more important than motorsport, so try and make sure we've got his education out of the way first before he gets back behind the wheel, but he should be back in action next time out at Croft. Of course, Jamie Thorburn, as we mentioned, took a year out last year, or missed most of the season in 2018, which is the fact that he was also doing the same thing, focusing on his exams. Thankfully he's managed to jump back into the car, he's all ready to go, and it's great to see him back on the grid, as we've mentioned. This is Michael McPherson's view. He's staring at the gearbox of David MacArthur, which means that should put him in about 7th position, I reckon, 7th or 8th. There is Spike Colbecker, race winner in the second race of Snetterton, as you viewed earlier on. There is possible potential here to have a 6th different race winner, although at the moment the first few positions are filled by drivers that have won a race so far this year. Top 4 are all race winners. Jamie Thorburn, if he can get a good restart, may put himself into contention here to make himself the 6th different race winner. How great would that be on his return back to the championship? Also behind him, James Clark and Morgan Quinn. David MacArthur could cause an upset on one of his local circuits. All depends on how well these guys can handle the restart. And what's also important, as we see the 2 stricken cars of Brendan Lee on the left and Jamie Sharp on the right, now firmly extricated and moved out of the way, what we could see is a bit of a surprise if someone can get a good restart, because what's also helping here is not only are we getting sunnier conditions, but the fact that we have got cars weaving from side to side on the road, which means we should be starting to dry up the road a little bit better. It means that by the time we get races later on this weekend, it should be hopefully a nice bone dry circuit, and lap times will be at their optimum pace. Now, thankfully, the safety car lights are out on the Mini Cooper safety car, which means Neil McLennan now becomes the de facto safety car on the field. He now has to choose exactly when he wants to pull the pin and restart the race. He'll try and sort of just back everyone up now on the exit, weaving side to side, a little bit of braking, just deciding when he wants to go. Not quite ready just yet, just trying to fool the guys behind. Rory Smith is the first man that has to try and follow him. Ross Martin and everyone else will use Neil McLennan pretty much as a beacon to see if he can try and go with them and get a bit of a jump on second place Rory Smith. Rory stuck to the gearbox at Neil McLennan there, weaving side to side like it's an 8-wheeled Formula Ford. But McLennan will try and get himself back onto the racing line and make the run off the final corner, which I think he has now. Trying to fool everyone, but I don't think he's managed to fool Rory Smith as they come out of the final corner, back onto the pit straight. And under green flag conditions, we're back under racing once again at Anglesey. Into turn 1, McLennan still leads and already up for second place. Martin putting on the attack on Rory Smith. So immediately Rory couldn't get the jump on McLennan, and as we said, Ross Martin was in the prime position in third place. He managed to see exactly when McLennan put his foot down and got the better jump, possibly prepared to usurp Rory Smith in second place. Leaders out of the banking towards the right-hander at Church for the first time back under racing conditions. There's David MacArthur. He's got Morgan Quinn in front, Michael McPherson behind him as they head out now onto the back straight. And here for second place, you can see Ross Martin tucked under the gearbox, almost physically pushing him, NASCAR tandem style, on the run towards the Rocket Complex. Rory Smith does go defensive, tries to close back up under braking just behind Neil McLennan. Has a look up the inside for the second part. In fact, McLennan drifts deep. Smith puts his nose up the inside, but remember, in these slightly damp conditions, the outside line off the racing line where all the rubber is gives better grip and better traction. You can see that Rory Smith and Ross Martin are doing exactly the same thing. They're following suit on exactly the same line, as is this man, Spike Colbecker, albeit a few car lengths back in fourth. You can see also, just like karting, Neil McLennan just throwing the car into the corner, throwing in so much lock on the steering, but thankfully managing to bring it back by the time he gets to the end of the corner and back onto the Tom Price straight towards the hairpin. So McLennan still leads, Smith in second place, Martin third, Spike Colbecker just closing back in fourth place. Little tight exit in third place there for Ross Martin, losing a bit of ground and traction in the process. We go back on board with Spike Colbecker on the charge down towards the bus stop. And still, Neil McLennan is fending everyone off here pretty nicely. But Ross Martin, you feel, possibly is a little bit racier than Rory Smith. There's a bit of a wiggle from the Medina chassis in second place. The leaders go through turn 1 once again. And again, the view from Colbecker looking forward. There's the top 3. Must be agonising as a driver in these conditions where you're not exactly able to make too much progress closing in. Just under brakes, he does manage to get a little bit closer on that occasion. But just watching the top 3 in front, maybe just sitting back in the prime position here, thinking just keep on scrapping you 3, because if any of them makes a mistake, he will be the main benefactor in this race. So out of Church Corner, onto this very high-speed section in the School Kink, and looking up the inside for second place goes Ross Martin, almost puts 2 wheels onto the grass. And tries to put himself on the outside line. Now, if he can stay on the outside, he'll put him on the inside for the second part of Rocket. But Martin thought discretion was the better part of valour, just backs out of the move and stays in third place. But what it now does is it brings Spike Colbecker into play in fourth position to get a possible podium here, as now Rory Smith is starting to put the pressure on Neil McLennan this time, and McLennan goes too deep into the right-hander up at the top of Peel Corner, straight into where he goes Rory Smith. Now, can McLennan get him back as we ride on board with the Scotsman down towards the corkscrew? He looks to the outside line, they always bang wheels, but they do bang wheels, and there's more contact. Off the road goes Neil McLennan. Is there damage to the 25 car? I'm not sure. Let's see if Rory Smith can continue either, but Neil McLennan will be absolutely livid at that. And what it now does is it leaves a battle for the lead between Ross Martin and Spike Colbecker. And what do we say? If anything happens to the top 3 in front of Spike Colbecker, he will be one of the main benefactors, and indeed he is. He's now into second place with a chance of possibly picking up his second win of the season. And look at the gap they've pulled out. On third place, James Clark. Now, Rory Smith has got going in the background. He's going side by side with Morgan Quinn, back in 5th position. Meanwhile, Neil McLennan, I think possibly, is either out of the race or way down the order, because we haven't seen him rejoin just yet, although the car was still under its own steam when he was on the grass. So we'll wait and see what progress he can make if he is still going. So now it's a 2-horse race at the front of the field. Ross Martin in the white Van Diemen, ahead of the Cliff Dempsey race chassis of Spike Colbecker. Scotland versus America. James Clark just back there in third place. And I think also another benefactor in that sequence has been David MacArthur, I think, because he should be up to around about 4th or 5th position. So watch out for David in the mix just behind at the base of the top 5. This is our main focus at the front. Ross Martin and the ex-Noel Murray 1999 Van Diemen chassis. Jamie Sharp's also driven this car right here at the Winter Race Day meeting in November last year. That would be the least concern for Ross Martin right now. What is the main concern is the man right behind him on his gearbox for the lead of the race. Spike Colbecker trying that outside line where there might be a little bit more grip. Ross Martin feels he's more comfortable taking a tighter run off the second part of the Rocket Complex. And again looking for the outside line. That's what possibly set Rory Smith up for the move and looking for the undercut here on the sprint out of Peel Corner. Up towards the corkscrew, tries to pull alongside. But Martin shuts the door and Colbecker has to sit back and plot his next move of the next few corners for the remainder of the race. They sprint off of the corkscrew corner. Now Neil McLennan on board with him. He has got going once again, but he's way down the order. I think this is one of the Oldfield Motorsport cars in front of him that he's battling with. Yes, it is. That's Scott Huntley, the British driver, just passed his driving test recently. That's a little concern to Neil McLennan. Up the inside of the corkscrew and back up another place to try and salvage some points after the early contact. You see in the background, you see that Rory Smith is still in 4th place in the red and white car at the back of the shot. Just behind him, indeed, in 5th place, is David MacArthur. So not bad for a one-off appearance in the National Formula 4 Championship with a local driver. But now the battle rages on still between Scotland's Ross Martin and the young American Spike Colbecker. Remember, he's not inexperienced in these cars, Spike. It's his first year racing in the UK, but he has raced Formula Ford-esque cars both in New Zealand and in Canada. So he's used to the chassis and the dynamics of what a Formula Ford style car is. But racing in the UK, one of the toughest championships in Formula Ford in the world, is certainly a challenge for him individually. Now, further back down the order, we've got a scrap going on here between Morgan Quinn, there's the American Aaron Jeanson, and behind them is Adam Quartermain. He's one of the few Clubman class cars in the field. Those are the two classes, the pro class where drivers like this man, Michael McPherson, contest for the main title, and then the Clubman class for the more enthusiast drivers, I should say, do battle it out for their own accolade. We see here Morgan Quinn coming under threat from Aaron Jeanson, up to the second part of Rocket, trying to get the undercut on the exit, a little sideways there for the American. Well held, good car control in these very tricky damp conditions. Just behind him trying to put the pressure on is Adam Quartermain, staying with these young chargers. Great effort so far from Adam. As they come out of Peel Corner and down the hill towards the corkscrew. It's a very tricky sort of downhill curving braking zones that head all the way through. And then again a big wiggle on the exit over the curbs. Again, the curbs in these conditions, even in slightly damp conditions, are very treacherous. In the dry, they're tricky enough as it is with very slick paint. When it's wet, they become even more slippery. It's like sheet ice. So you want to stay off the curbs as much as possible if you can help it. But even just putting one wheel on them in the wrong place and putting your foot down the throttle at exactly the wrong time can spell disaster if you don't modulate the throttle and just manage your line a little bit more carefully. Into the bus stop. Morgan Quinn again taking that defensive line. Jeanson fancies that grippier outside line, but again, just covered off on the exit and nothing doing until the next chance to attack. Back with the leaders. See the rain light on the back of Ross Martin's car shining away. Spike Colbecker continues to pursue him in second place. Head up towards Church Corner now. Again, just wider away from the apex as they both let the cars drift out wide over the curb. Back with our scrap between Quinn, Jeanson and Quartermain. Still no change in the order between these three. They now head towards the right-hander at Church, and we've just seen the leaders turn through. And still, Morgan Quinn is in that position, but Aaron Jeanson lining him up here for a move. He'll try and put himself alongside through School Corner, which he has. A good exit off the right-hander, sprinting on towards the top of the hill at Rocket Complex. And Jeanson, with a fantastic pass, gets his nose in front and into the position before he's even hit the brakes. Aaron Jeanson was a former Team USA scholarship racer. He's one of the two drivers that come over every year, usually every October for the Formula Ford Festival, and then a couple of weeks later for the Walter Hayes Trophy. He usually gets some slightly adverse conditions in typical British weather. He's getting a typical Formula Ford attack here as Morgan Quinn tries to respond after losing that place. As we head on to the last lap here in this opening round of the weekend here at Anglesey International Formula Fords, and again, both Martin and Colbecker feel they have to go deep on the exit of the hairpin on the Grand Prix loop to try and hold to this position. But on the sprint down towards the final corner, Spike Colbecker has put him under immense pressure, but Ross Martin is going to do something which nobody else has done. He's going to win a race for the second time this season. Colbecker will try and sprint towards the line, but it's not going to work. They get one more time around now as they go into the left-hander for the last time into turn one. One more chance now for Colbecker to try and make it through as they head up towards the hairpin. And still, Martin will not give way. Colbecker again taking that tighter, that more wider entry into the corner and a tighter exit off to try and get a better slingshot up towards Church Corner, and he is in the slipstream. So we can put Martin under pressure here. Martin's been in this position so many times, not just in the National Championship, but also as a former Scottish champion as well. He was fairly dominant in that a couple of years ago, but of course now joining Team Dolan, the reigning champions for the last couple of years. Really is making the most of that 1999 Van Diemen chassis. Just had a quick glimpse there of James Clark in third place as the leaders head through Rocket for the final time. And James Clark is there looking up to himself for second place, despite Copper can see himself demoted as the two Cliff Dempsey cars go into combat. That's the last thing they want for each other as they now go and let Ross Martin escape up the road back on board with James Clark. I think possibly Cliff Dempsey probably shouting on the pit wall saying, leave each other alone, just come home in second and third and grab the points. Because the harder they fight each other, the easier it is now for Ross Martin in the closing stages here, in the final few corners of the last lap of the race, to break away and seal this victory once and for all. Into the hairpin for the final time come the leaders, and Ross Martin has pretty much held off every single attack, everything that Spike Kohlbecker and co could throw at him. And after an early incident with Neil McLennan and Rory Smith put them out of contention, he and Kohlbecker were the main benefactors. Both James Clark and Rory Smith have closed in. It's going to be a very close top four. But as we mentioned, Ross Martin does something which nobody else has done so far this year. He comes to the checkered flag and picks up his second National Formula Ford win of the season. His first of the weekend at Anglesey. Spike Kohlbecker picks up a very strong second place, and James Clark grabs third with Rory Smith in fourth position. Confirmation of the results with David MacArthur picking up the final spot in the top five. Jamie Thorburn in a brilliant sixth on his welcome return. Then Michael McPherson 7th, Aaron Jeanson 8th, Morgan Quinn 9th, and Adam Quartermain in 10th. Neil McLennan, after the contact with Rory Smith, does recover back to 11th, ahead of Huntley, Svensson, Monbaron and Woods, with MacArthur, Lee and Sharp with 3 retirements. A very breathtaking first race indeed.
Spike, that looked like really tough conditions out there, and then obviously the safety car. Could you quickly talk through what happened?
Yeah, at the beginning, it looked like it was going to be a wet race, and we converted to a dry setup. At the beginning, we struggled a little bit for traction, just trying to get down to the curbs. But later, later at the end of the race, it just started to dry up, and it helped us out a lot. But I mean, if it was a little bit drier, our setup would have been a little bit better. But there's nothing much we can do about it. You can't have someone constantly changing it like an Indy car. But it's just it's a good finish, but it's unlucky we finished second. Tomorrow we're going to need to win a few.
James, congratulations, third position. Can you quickly talk me through what was going through your mind in that race? Obviously coming back from Alton, where you had a bit of a stumble into a tyre wall.
But to be honest, it wasn't so much because of the crash. It was more because we'd not finished the first races of the first 2 rounds. I was kind of just not just going for a finish, but like I didn't want to play it too risky. And obviously those conditions are not the best for not playing it risky. So, and especially qualifying in the pack. So yeah, to start with, I just tried to keep it on the island because people were going off all over the place. So I made about 4 places by staying on the track. And then once the track dried up and the conditions are a bit more favourable, I could then start to press on and take a few more, I guess, like necessary risks.